In today's video, I'm going to be making a Sonic and Shadow cake. A huge thank you to Paramount Pictures who commissioned me to create this cake. So I've started by buying some official Sonic movie toys because they're going to really help me with the shape, especially the backs of their heads.
Here we go!
You can see I've drawn out a rough plan because I'm going to need an internal structure. You can see that in the background, just about. So my frame, I've made it over 2 boards because I want them to split, but it needs to go together so it looks like one cake from the front. I've cut out some card silhouettes. That's going to help me cut the shape of the cake. And I'm also going to cut out some cake drums as well too. I'm not really sure how to describe this shape, like a really awkward, unusual shape that will go under the spikes and internally across the cake structure. And one half will be Rice Krispies and the other half I think I'll do in cake. So we need to make this frame food safe. I'm just using a plastic hollow dowel, a cake dowel, and I'm going to create some edible glue just by melting some marshmallows. I'm going to put the melted marshmallow on my cake board and also on that plastic dowel as well. I've made some Rice Krispie treats, which is just Rice Krispies and marshmallows melted together. I'm going to push that onto this half of the cake around that dowel, pressing really firmly, otherwise they tend to fall apart if they're not compressed really nice and tight. You can see Shadow's head starting to take shape. And I thought if I make Shadow to the right shape in Rice Krispies, then once this is to the shape, it's going to make it a whole lot easier when I move on to Sonic's side where I make it in cake, because I can just carve the cake on Sonic's side to match Shadow. Now I'm going to cover the whole thing in chocolate ganache. If I just cover it straight away in a final layer of fondant, you're going to see all the lumps and bumps. If you don't want to use ganache, you can of course use modeling chocolate or even fondant. So I am using fondant, but I'm pressing it in firmly. I'm trying both ways just to see which is going to work best for me. But this is going to help kind of create the shape like the nose that sticks out a little bit more. Okay, so to Sonic's side, you can see I've got like almost like shelves in where the cake's going to go, and I've food safed the rod as well. I'm going to add cake onto there. And now for the fun part.
All right, boys, showtime!
Okay, so buttercream. I feel like Sonic should have some blue buttercream. And then I've got some circular cakes, which I've just kind of cut not quite in half. I'm going to remove a small piece that we can push around the sort of cake structure. And then we're going to put some layers of buttercream in between the cake. And I'll put some on the board at the side as well so the cake sticks tight against there. I feel like this cake got a lot bigger than I thought it was going to as I was making it. Okay, so I'm going to continue stacking that until I have covered most of like the spikes and the face area. And then I'm going to cut it to shape. You'll notice some of the spike bits are missing cake still, but I'm going to carve this roughly following that board that's in the middle for the silhouette. And then once I've carved this, I'm going to actually use Rice Krispie treats on the underside of those spikes. Are they spikes or are they spines on a hedgehog? Let me know in the comments below. Am I calling them the wrong thing? Once I've carved the cake to the shape I want, I'm going to cover it in ganache. I've swapped to dark chocolate ganache for this side, but I used white on the other, but it's fine. The reason I've used the dark one on this side is just it sets nice and firm. So I want to make sure that it is firm. I don't want anything collapsing because it is a big heavy cake, this. Where the cake won't hold on its own, we're just going to stick Rice Krispies on. So the underneath of the spikes is really tricky to get anything to stay on, whether it be the ganache or the Rice Krispies. I'm a bit worried that Sonic might fall apart.
I'm not gonna make it!
So I'm giving them a really tight squeeze because I am so worried about the Rice Krispies dropping off at a later point, and we need everything to be really nice and firm. Okay, so I haven't finished smoothing the ganache, but what I'm going to do is just roughly mark out where like his characteristics are going to go, his eyes and things like that, just so I can check that the shape is right. And then here I'm actually using, this is ganache and it's partially set but not fully set. So I'm using this almost as if it's like a clay, an edible clay, to put on a bit of extra shape over his eyebrows and his mouth area. On Shadow's side, I could still do it in the ganache, but I'm going to do it in the fondant. So there is quite a lot of fondant on the Shadow side. I'm just using an edible pen to mark on roughly where his eyes are going to go. And then I'm going to cut out a little bit so that we get more of a curved shape on the eye. And I'll just do the same on Sonic's side, only it's a little bit harder because it's so soft where the cake is. And then I'm going to add the ear. Now I've actually swapped to modeling paste for the ear. Modeling chocolate would be ideal for the ear. It's become so expensive as modeling chocolate, guys. And I just thought modelling paste would do the job as well. So I'm going to go with a thin layer of white fondant over that eye area. I'm just going to mark around the edge and then cut any extra off as well. I'll just try and smooth that down a little bit. Okay, so I think he's starting to take shape a lot more now. Can you guys tell at this stage who it is? You kind of already know who it is. So I'm just using some of my cake tools to scrape down that ganache. Now I should have smoothed it down fully with the flexible smoother, but I didn't, so I'm going over it this way instead. They're kind of like the tools you use when you're using clay, but these ones are specifically for cake decorating. I'm just going to make sure we don't lose that seam down the middle, so I am just running the knife down there because I don't want it to set too hard together. Let's get some white in Sonic's eye. And you'll notice on Sonic as well, I have actually put some fondant over his spikes, which I'm still not sure if we call them spikes or if they're called something else. I'm going to use some black edible pen now to draw in the pupil in Sonic. I'm not quite sure I got the eyes quite right. I think I might have gone a bit too big with the pupil and the iris, but I'm just drawing them on here just to see what they look like. I'm just going to push into the side of the mouth as well with my balling tool. And I'm going to cover any areas that I want to stick the fondant onto with a piping gel, so it's nice and sticky. I've bought ready coloured blue fondant, so I'm going to roll this out and we're going to place this on his head. It was too difficult to roll one piece that was big enough to cover the whole of Sonic's head, so I did have to do it piece at a time. If I'd have used modelling chocolate, I would have got nicer, smoother seams. Again, I didn't have modelling chocolate and I didn't buy any, so we're using fondant, it's fine. It worked okay, I think, in the end, but I'm just pushing down around any areas that air bubbles might get stuck in as well. And because the seam might be obvious, what I'm going to do is cut a zigzag pattern in. I feel like that will hide the seam a bit more. And let's cut around where his mouth area goes. So I'm just going to press in a little bit above like his eyebrow area just to get a bit more shape in there. And then let's trim just under that brow. Okay, so I'm going to put in some lines. I realise when I'm doing this that I actually make a lot of cakes that have like a fur effect, and that it takes me a very long time to add these individual lines, but I think it's worth putting them in. I would have loved to spend longer getting more lines in, but also snip in some bits as well to make the hair look a bit more 3D just with some scissors. These are ones that I only use for cake decorating, they're not been used for anything else. Again, more lines. Let's have a break from doing the lines to put in the colour of the inner part of his ear, and then we'll still add more lines to that as well though. So for the rest of the fondant, I tried to kind of cut it so it fit in with those zigzag lines that I did. I am definitely wishing at this point that I just had used modelling chocolate so I could blend it together a little bit easier. Okay, he needs an arm. Let's roll out some of our leftover blue fondant. Just pretty basic shape wise, just kind of a little cylinder shape. Just stick to the side of his body, and then we're going to put, again, more hairlines in. I didn't show you, but I have added the same colour to his chest as what was inside the ear. So these are edible food colours. I know everybody asks if it's makeup. It's not. It really is edible food colours, guys, that I do use. And then let's add some individual little hairs. And then let's add some individual spikes as well. I'm not sure I should have done this. I can't decide if he looked better with or without them. I know that he has them on some of the movie pictures, and I think he does have them in the movie, but I don't know if it looks right on mine. Also, I would have liked to have spent longer rolling these out, and you'll see by the time I did shadow, I got fed up of doing them, so shadow didn't even end up with any of these. Now the blue I've used isn't quite the right colour blue, so I've used some powdered colour, some powdered edible colour, and it's just mixed with like a dipping solution or clear alcohol to make like a really runny paint. And I'm going to paint this on, and it runs into those lines that we've put in the hair. So it drips into like the lines that I've put in, and it makes it go a little bit darker in there where it kind of sits. Okay, now we need to repeat the whole thing, pretty much the whole thing on Shadow's side, this time using black fondant. I was tempted to just leave him completely smooth, but obviously he wouldn't look right without those hairlines in. How long do you guys reckon it took me to put these hairlines in all together on this one? I'm asking you guys to guess. I realise I didn't time it, so I don't know. Longer than I wanted to spend putting hairlines in, but could have done with longer still. So Shadow has these red bits as well, these little red highlights. So let's get those in too. More lines. Trying to kind of push the lines so they go over the red onto the black. Okay, so we're getting there. Shadow also has this red bit that kind of goes on like the brow area. I don't know if I might have made that a little bit too big, but let's get some hairlines in it anyway. It's funny, when I plan on making these cakes, I always think, oh, they'll only ever take a couple of days. This one I spent probably the whole week on, not constantly, but he took a lot longer than I thought he was gonna take. So just like with Sonic's side, when we painted some really diluted black food colour on, I'm doing the same on Shadow's side, but just on the red area. So I've added some white fondant onto Shadow's chest, and then we're going to put in more hairlines. I'm going to press pretty firmly so it cuts through. Let's cover that mouth area. So again, just some fondant in the colour that we've used for the inside of the ears. And I'm going to try and cut that round to shape. Okay, so I've covered like the whole mouth and nose area. And I've pressed in fairly deep at the edge of the mouth, and then we're running a line in for like the smile bit. Although they're only kind of smiling on one side. I'm just re-putting in that center line because I don't want it to fully seal together, because then it will make it really difficult for me to pull them apart later. I want them to come apart and face each other. And you guys by now know what I'm doing with the tool, with those lines. Do you know what would have been great? If I could have just stuck on lots of individual pieces of hair everywhere, because that would have been a really nice effect. But after just putting about 3 or 4 on there, I realised it was just going to take too long. So again, shorter as we get closer to the centre of the nose, longer as we come out towards the cheek with those lines. And then let's give him like this bottom eyelid. Again, on some pictures he looked like he had them, some he didn't. And then for Sonic's side, I remembered that actually quite often I create this kind of furry effect by using a piping nozzle instead, which is way quicker. So I wish I had done it this way on Shadow's side. But yeah, it's fine. I did it on Sonic's side. Saved me a little bit of time. Now Shadow seems to have a black line in his mouth there. Sonic does, but not as much. I don't know if they're his lips maybe. So let's do it on Sonic's side with a pen. Fondant went on Shadow's side for that. Let's just put a little bit of a line on there as well. Just using the edible pen. And then let's get some powder colour, some edible powder colour just on here, so it's a little bit less flat in colour. You can see I've painted a little bit of like diluted black powder on there as well for some shading, although it kind of looks a little bit patchy on there. I'm going for a slightly orange on like the cheek, and then let's make the nose. So it's almost kind of a teardrop shape with the point cut off. And then some nostrils. I think he has a bit of texture as well. And I think they both have the same nose. They're very similar looking to each other, which is better for this design. Okay, so we've pushed that in. Okay, since I drew on Sonic's eye, I'm going to press it on in fondant for Shadow, just to see what it looks like. See which I prefer. I'm just going to still use the edible pen for like the colour on the iris. So I'm going to use red, maybe a bit of orange, and then even a bit of black. I don't think I got Shadow's eyes as kind of bright and burny looking as what they maybe could have been. I'm adding a white highlight to the nose. And also I'm just using that edible pen to kind of put on some fine little white lines anywhere that I want to look a little bit lighter and a little bit more highlighted. Now I would have loved to have painted this on everywhere with lots of individual hairs, but it really just would have been a bit too time consuming. And with it being cake inside and me having almost spent a week on it anyway, I didn't want it to be too stale to eat, so I didn't want to spend much longer on it. So I've added a white highlight to Shadow's eye, just darkening around the iris on Sonic, and then I'm going to add a white oval in there. So there he is, all finished, Sonic and Shadow. So I'm really looking forward to going and seeing Sonic 3 very soon. Okay, let's cut a slice of Sonic.
What?
I hope you enjoyed this video, guys. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more like this one. And I think I'm going to be going to see this movie very soon.
Ends now.
And you can grab a copy of my new book over on my website or even on Amazon too. And if you want to see more detailed classes, you can find my masterclasses online at zoesfancycakes.co.uk.